Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Leicester Diocese's intercultural worshipping communities and discipleship at Leicester Cathedral. My name is Jude and I am the discipleship officer at Leicester Cathedral. So this is the next in our Global Voices series. Global Voices has been a series of conversations which aim to offer spaces in which we can explore issues of everyday faith, but from various global perspectives. And in tonight in particular, we are considering things from an intergenerational angle. So primarily thinking about how we may work with children and young people across our church schools, our homes, and within our churches. And our theme specifically is faith at home. So considering what being anti-racist and intercultural across these spheres of church, home and school might look like, and to indeed reflect on how this may impact on our own individual discipleship. I wonder if there's anything in particular that may have brought you here this evening, anything that you may be looking to learn or to gain from the conversation, and to consider that there will be opportunities to listen, to personally reflect, and indeed to ask questions later on. We have two great speakers here this evening, both Bola-Alysia and Ale, who Jessie will introduce shortly. And these speakers will be journeying with us this evening, sharing their experiences and their expertise. Both Bola-Alysia and Ale will share for 15 minutes each, after which there will be a brief moment of silence in which we can receive and process what has been shared. We hope that these moments of silence will offer you some opportunities to quietly reflect in response to what has been offered. And then after the final reflection, there will be a moment of time of conversation, which will be led by Jessie Tang this evening. And after that moment of conversation between Jessie and Bola-Alysia and Ali, we will then have a question and response time as well, in which you are very much encouraged to use the Q&A function here on Zoom to contribute questions, and we'd love to hear from you and have you part of the conversation. We are intending to finish at 9 p.m. this evening. We do acknowledge that some of the content, some of the things that we may explore this evening may provoke a range of feelings and indeed may trigger some difficult and challenging feelings. So we do hope that we can all collaborate to ensure this is a safe and a welcoming environment this evening in which we can explore and journey together. If you do have any technical issues, then Luke is looking after all things technical in the chat, and we'll be able to respond if there's anything that you need to put there. And just to remind you as well that this evening we are recording this webinar and it will be published at a later date on YouTube. So thank you very much again for coming along. And I'm now going to pass over to Jessie Tang to continue our introductions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jude. So my name is Jessie Tang. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Intercultural Ministry Director for the Diocese of Leicester. And I'm very delighted to be able to I'm delighted to be able to introduce to you our speakers today. So first up, we have Bola-Alysia Ayonrinde. Bola-Alysia is the National Education Lead for Racial Justice for the Church of England. She is a highly motivated and innovative leader with a 10-year progressive career in education, including teaching in various places around the UK, as well as West Africa and in East Sussex. She is a renowned school improvement champion who's passionate about sharing her expertise to create long-lasting change in the education system and beyond. She also creates and provides continuous professional development as part of her dedication towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And another thing, she is particularly passionate about allyship and increasing the understanding of intersectionality and intergenerational racial trauma. So I'd now like to pass the time on to Bola-Alysia. So Bola-Alysia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and thank you for your intro. I'll just share my screen and please let me know if you can see that okay.
Yes, it's working.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. So yes, my name's Bola-Alysia, and as Jessie said, I'm the National Education Lead for Racial Justice. I'd like to start by asking you to look at the screen, please. What can you tell from the people on the screen? What are you able to see? What aren't you able to see? What assumptions have you made? What information is missing? Now, you might assume that you can identify their race or ethnicity from the colour of their skin. You might even suggest you can tell their gender. However, we are unable to interpret their race, age, if they have a disability, mental health and well-being status, in fact, all the protected characteristics. Yet these characteristics that can be complex to denote are things that are so important to consider about our children, young people, and adults in our context. When we think about the social construct of race, we need to consider that people are not one-dimensional. Intersectionality is key. So intersectionality, as coined by, in 1989 by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, describes how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics overlap and they intersect. For example, you could have race and neurodiversity, race and mental health, or even race and gender. When I think about a common purpose that ties us all together, schools, churches, and communities, I think about the desire God has placed in our hearts to see every child and adult through his eyes. That unconditional love, irrespective of what they look like, if they have a disability, or like the protected characteristics I mentioned. We know that we are all made in God's image, and that our God makes no mistakes. The preciousness and uniqueness of each individual child and adult needs to be valued and celebrated in order for all members of our communities to come as they are and be included, as we are all amazing creations of God. So we can ask ourselves, is every child and adult experiencing life in all its fullness? Or full flourishing is only found when every single member of our church and school communities experiences true belonging, knowing they are welcome, completely included, valued, and celebrated. They find every possible avenue of academic and vocational progress and success open to them, without needing to overcome institutional barriers. They feel totally safe and secure wherever they are and fully connected with others. They're able to meaningfully participate in the life of their school, church, and communities, with their voices heard and their ideas acted upon. And lastly, they believe that a hope-filled future can and will be theirs because they see themselves represented in all aspects of school or church life. However, achieving this requires more than just good intentions. It requires active effort and commitment to creating an inclusive and equitable environment. We can build communities. Building communities that collaborate to ensure flourishing for all, particularly the marginalized and the most vulnerable. We can ensure dignity, seeing the innate dignity in each and every child and adult, therefore seeking to understand them as best we can and prioritizing their needs within our churches and schools. And we can demonstrate wisdom by upskilling staff with evidence-informed knowledge to support children and adults as best they can. Now, in order to evaluate the present reality of our organisation, and energize our teams towards a hope-filled future, we must first ask ourselves some important questions. Who is missing from our organisation and why? Are diverse candidates applying for roles, and are they being selected? Who are the gatekeepers in our organisations, and are they aware of their own biases? Who is speaking up for diverse staff, and who is taking responsibility for mentoring and training the next generation of leaders? We must also be careful with our definition of diversity, because diversity tends to relate to bodies, whereas inclusion is culture. True diversity is about a culture that intrinsically values difference. How do you value difference in your context? Only when everyone flourishes will we all truly flourish together. What does it look like to suffer with those in our communities who are struggling? And who in our communities do we need to honour and celebrate? There is so much power in stories. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanise. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. Which stories are we telling in our contexts? How do we tell them? Who is holding the pen? Whose voices are missing? And do the stories we tell empower, humanise, and repair broken dignity? Now, practically speaking, this translates into books and resources that share diverse stories and perspectives. However, ample time is needed to allow people to share their own stories and listen to those of others with openness, with respect and care. Regular opportunities within the community to practice hospitality are needed and foster belonging, especially towards those who are marginalised. Now, it's important to tell or hear the stories of the past so that we have an understanding of context within the work we are doing within racial justice. What are young people doing in 2023 as opposed to young people in the past? Now, our children and young people do not see racial justice work as optional or as a phase. They see this as something that is completely necessary. If we are intentional about listening and responding to children from a very young age, then voicing their views and being involved will be normal for teens and young adults. There's a difference between consultation and genuine participation, and it's really exciting to think such a change is possible. Empathy and sympathy are two very different things, because empathy fuels connection, whereas sympathy drives disconnection. So I'm just going to share 3 suggestions for fostering empathy and therefore connection. Now, empathy creates a safe space and a respectful space for intergenerational conversations around racism. Now, older generations may have different perspectives shaped by their experiences, while younger generations bring new insights and understandings. Empathy enables individuals from different age groups to listen to and understand each other's points without judgment. It encourages active listening, mutual respect, and a willingness to learn from one another. Through empathetic dialogue, generations can share their experiences, challenge assumptions, and also collaborate on anti-racist initiatives. Empathy also encourages the sharing of personal narratives and historical experiences. Now, each generation has its own unique stories related to racism and discrimination. But by empathizing with the stories and experiences of older generations, younger children can gain a deeper appreciation of the struggles and challenges faced by their predecessors. Similarly, older generations can empathize with the evolving realities and perspectives of younger individuals, fostering understanding and connection. And through that empathetic storytelling, intergenerational anti-racist discipleships becomes a rich exchange of knowledge, wisdom, and empathy. And lastly, empathy nurtures solidarity. and inspires collective action across generations. So by empathizing with the experiences of different age groups, individuals can recognize the common threads of discrimination and inequality that persists across generations. Now, this shared understanding really helps to create a collective commitment, and that's towards building anti-racist discipleship. And that empathy motivates younger generations to learn from the wisdom of their elders and leverage their energy to drive meaningful change. And simultaneously, it encourages older generations to listen and support the ideas and visions of younger individuals. Together, different generations can collaborate on racial justice initiatives, amplifying their impact and creating lasting change. And this ultimately leads to compassion. We can provide love, dignity, and respect, loving the most vulnerable, broadening the definition of educational and vocational success and flourishing, and tenaciously removing barriers for the children and young people in our care. We can recognize the factors that impact ambition, and through patience, creativity, and determination, we can create cultures and environments that enable a shift in the ambition of our children, young people, and adults. When we listen and respond to our children and young people, we should listen without interruption so that we create a safe environment. We should listen without judgment so that we create a culture and space of empathy. We should listen with discernment so that those who may not be able to articulate as they intend or may not be as loud as others are still heard. And lastly, we should listen without the need to hear words, but to cherish the uniqueness of all our children and young people. Because when we do, things like this happen. And this is a child else who's 13 years old. And I asked why racial justice is important to them. This is so important because racism has been happening for so long, and we need racial justice to help change the world. Police brutality, people of colour getting followed around shops, getting bags searched, even though they haven't stolen anything, and missing children of colour going unnoticed for such long periods of time. These are all things that need to change. The time is now. The curriculum is becoming more inclusive, and when I learn about people of colour like myself, then that makes me feel seen. In my church, I'd never had a service led by a person of colour until I saw Reverend Martha. That made me realise the importance of diversity in the church. I hope for a future where people of colour are treated with fairness and respect, and they are celebrated for all the amazing things they can do. So do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. It's the importance of taking small action and making a difference in our own communities. By working together and advocating for change at a local level, we can have a collective impact on the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bola-Alysia, for your talk. And we're going to have a chance to speak to you later on and for everyone to ask questions as well. But for now, we're going to go into our contemplative pause, which I will lead us all in. I'd like to invite you now all to speak the words that are in bold. Trusting that God is present with us and among us, let us turn to and call upon God, who is the giver and source of all wisdom. O God, take us from rich words into silence. Let us listen together for your wisdom. Let's hold silence for 1 minute. O God, take us from silence back into words. Let us listen together for your wisdom. Well, now we're going to move to our next speaker, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker now. Our next speaker is Alexandre Costa. Ale is a member of our diocese's community of the Tree of Life, which is a new monastic community. And he's spending this academic year working with young adults and social media at Holy Trinity Leicester. Ale is originally from Brazil and has experience working in advertising, planning, and strategy for brand communication and identity. So I'd like to welcome Ale now to speak to us. So Ale, over to you.
I'm having just one problem with my video. If Luke can. And now it's working. Hey guys, sorry about that. Thank you, Jessie, for this opportunity. Thank you so much for the opportunity also to come here and share with you guys. Unfortunately, I didn't brought like a full presentation. While I was thinking about this whole opportunity here and the webinar in general, I felt like it was a good chance to actually share a little bit of my testimony and how God is doing some things during my time here in the UK, and how this experience of coming to a new culture impacted me and my faith as well. And so I'm 29 years old, so I'm a little bit older for the internship that I'm doing. And I was born and raised in São Paulo, Brazil. It's pretty much our London, if you guys want some reference. So it's a big city, a lot of people there. And I grew up there. I studied there, advertising and marketing for 4 years. And I worked with that for 8 years before dropping everything and coming to the UK to take a year working at Holy Trinity with young adults and social media. The whole process of coming to England, it's full of testimonies, and it was really God-led. I never thought about moving to the UK, and out of nowhere, during some prayers, I asked God for an opportunity to live overseas for a while and have the chance to experience that. And glad enough, after that bold prayer in the end of 2021, a friend reached out and told me about the opportunity of coming and working as an intern for young adults here in Leicester. And after a lot of prayer, after some people that didn't know about the whole process had like dreams with me coming to the UK and all confirmations, I arrived here in the UK. And at first I was really chill. I was, it's going to be really cool, really easy, like no stress. I always dealt well by the thought of being far from my home, from my parents and everything. But as soon as I got into the plane, something hit me and I got super emotional. And it's so funny because I was literally crying and trying to hide my face because I'm 6'4", just for some like context for you guys. So I'm really big, and I was like tearing up and really like having a moment. And while I was doing that, a lot of the passengers were like literally getting into the plane. And so I was trying to hide my face and looking through the window. And I was just thinking like, what am I doing? Like, God, like, what am I doing? And well, the first couple of days in Leicester wasn't they weren't the easiest, but fair enough. After a week here, I got the chance to meet everyone at my church, all the staff, and got the chance to start working. And I realized what was the whole process and how the whole purpose of coming to the UK. And it wasn't easy. After 2 months, I had a big conversation at my church with my line manager to align specifically about like these cultural differences. I believe the way that I was communicating and the way that I was expressing my ideas wasn't the best, and it wasn't like fitting with the culture that I was part of. And I needed to understand that that is not a problem of like people judging my culture, but actually like it was something that I needed to adjust and understand, because if we're doing something that is really good and with the best heart and really God-led, and we are not capable of communicate and bring those ideas in the right way, and that we actually giving people actually a different message at the end, it's not a blessing at all, and it's our responsibility as well to keep that in mind. So I sat down with my line manager and I had these conversation, that tough conversation, and it was funny because I caught myself reminding my fellow workers that even though I can speak English and I can understand the language, and that is a privilege and a blessing, it doesn't mean that is my first language. So I found a barrier on my communication because what I was trying to express, probably I didn't use the correct words to say some things. And that was a barrier that I noticed after like a while. If you think about 60 days, it's a lot of days. And after that, I got the chance to align a lot of things with my church, and I'm super blessed that they were open to hear me, and they understood also, and they were open to change also some things on their side, and we came together. And right now I can definitely say that the amount of growth that I had during this period and the amount of growth that the ministry that I'm involved had during this period was amazing. So focusing a little bit more on that, like talking more about young people and how coming from another country impacted me. So in Brazil, you guys know that this weather that we are facing right now is quite like normal. So we have a lot of sun, we have a lot of heat, and I think that makes us people that wants to go out and to hang out every single time. We are really like we are open, and in 5 minutes I can become your best friend, like literally. If I meet you and I have a good time with you, I'm gonna invite you to my house, and like this is it. Like we're really open. That's a blessing, but also sometimes can like be a little bit painful, because sometimes you can invite people that they're actually not the best people, and that we bring along, and then we realize that maybe we need to like slow down a little bit. So that was one barrier that I faced when I came here. This cultural difference where I was expecting people to invite me or to have the opportunity to hang out with them after the service or during the week or something. And most of the guys wanted to go back home because they wanted to be warm and cozy. And different than my culture, you take some time to understand who you're getting involved with, and if that person is really nice or not. And then you get an invitation and get the opportunity to hang out in a more a personal level. So that was some other things about my culture that I definitely saw like that I needed to understand and learn first to then be able to work with them and also bring the right message and the same challenges that I wanted to bring and grow in faith with them. And what I realized that a lot of people, and we had this challenge in the beginning of the year by our vicar, that was, I want to focus on young adults and I want to see our community growing. And I was like, okay, awesome, let's do it. And this is amazing. This is definitely going to happen. And after a while, I realized that sometimes to see growth, we need to give space. And what I want to say with this analogy is like pretty much, if you want something to grow, you need to give space to grow. So if you think about a tree, like if you don't give space for the roots to grow and for the tree to become taller and taller, there's no way that this tree is going to be big. And we need to nurture that, and we need to take care of that. And I was looking at and realizing that what we are calling the church of tomorrow is actually the church of today. And it's interesting because sometimes we pray and we ask for young people, for youth, for a passion, for people inside the church. And we forgot that, we constantly forget that we already have those young people there. And the way that we are looking at them maybe is not the right way. And I speak that like putting myself there as well. For a long time, I thought about, oh, young people, youth, they are the church of tomorrow, so we need to prepare them so in the future they take over. But actually, I believe that they are ready now, and that we need to prepare them now to take over. And how we can do this is by investing time over anything else. If you give time to young people, they will, like, first they will value that. Right now, there are loads of studies that show that time is actually the most valuable thing that young people consider right now in society. So they are constantly trying to save time. So that's why we see platforms with 1 minute videos and 30 seconds content and all this stuff around. So we see some people craving for time. And if you give that, if you invest time into these people, they're going to give back to you and respond to you in a positive way. What I learned is every time that I stopped and allow myself to actually look at these guys and how can I sit down with them, hear from them, get to know them, and understand their challenges and what I can bring and walk together, that was the best thing that I could do to them. It's better than putting an event together. It's better than planning a worship night. It's better than all this stuff. And the other thing that I believe that we should invest a lot is the Bible. I believe that if we understand and we fall in love by the Bible, and we teach people how to fall in love by the Bible, we enable people to hold love and passion for something that is the ultimate truth, and that is something that we can for sure trust and believe in everything that is there. And that way I teach them a way of like getting the best answers for all the challenges that they can face. And we start to build people that are actually growing with the values and the character that we see constantly in the Bible. And I think that's both the keys to impact and to prepare the young people to step into a place where not only inside of the church they are influential, but also outside of the church. So we're gonna see a reflection on their behavior on schools, on uni and college, and on workplaces. And that's where we are called to be. The church is it's an amazing place that we can gather and celebrate and be together as a community, but we are called to be outside of these four walls that we call church, and we are called to make disciples, and we are called to go and become fishers of people. And I believe that if we exercise this daily, and if we hold these values and we hold these as a lifestyle, is the way that we can impact and that we can change and that we can bring all the barriers that we see in society right now down. Because if I'm founded on the values of the Bible, I understand the value of every person, of every culture, every race, and it doesn't matter who you are. I understand and I learn how to love you unconditionally. It doesn't matter if we don't agree initially, I will know, and I know how to love you. And I think that's the key for a lot of the issues that we see around the world, and that we need to step into, and that we need to become more bold to speak about these things that sometimes the church and as Christians and believers, we took a step down and we didn't want to speak about it. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you guys. Hopefully, if you have questions, write it down. I will be more than happy to answer those and chat a little bit with you guys, a little bit more about this subject with you guys. And yeah, thank you so much for hearing me. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Ale, for your sharing. It's been good to hear your experiences. And we are going to go to our next contemplative pause as well. So I like to invite you to read the words in bold with me. Giving thanks for the abiding presence of Christ, we take a moment to notice how what has been shared so far echoes, shimmers, or stirs in us. As we journey together as disciples, may we meet you in the silence. Trusting in the inspiration of God's Spirit as we journey together as disciples, may we meet you in our words. Well, I'd like to invite our panelists back, Bola-Alysia and Ale, and we're going to have a conversation as well. But I'd also like to say that if you have any questions, please do put it in the Q&A. You should see it at the bottom of your screen. Don't put it in the chat, but put it in the Q&A. And then after this conversation, we'll have time for question and reflection as well. So thank you both so much for your sharing and input. And it was great to hear from you, and I learned a lot. And I've just got some thoughts and some questions for you both as well. So Bola-Alysia, you talked a little bit about the culture of how we can create a flourishing community. And there's one thing that really struck me when you talked about a hope-filled future. And the quote that you also read out talked about seeing oneself being represented as well. And I think for me, I've realized that the value and importance of representation. I spoke to a friend who is also from an East Asian background like myself, and she said that at the age of, I think she was probably about 20, and she's grown up in the UK like me. She went to China for a charity work, and she saw models. So she saw models on billboards of Chinese women, and that was the first time she thought that Chinese women could be beautiful. And so that really struck me, because it made me think, actually, how much representation have I seen? So as well as that, I think you talked a little bit about true belonging and feeling safe and secure, meaningful participation, and all these kind of things into creating flourishing community. And I was just wondering if you have any tips as well of actually how can we ensure that we can create a flourishing community with all of these wonderful aspects. So yeah, Bola-Alysia, do you have any tips? Ali, you can jump in as well about a flourishing community.
I think I kind of alluded to some of that in my presentation, but really is about making sure that when we're thinking about flourishing communities, it is who is at the table. So have diverse voices been heard? And as I mentioned, often when we think about diversity, we think about that visible appearance, but there's often assumptions made. So for example, my background, my mum is Brazilian and my dad's Nigerian. But then often when people see Ali, I know it's going to tell you after. But often when people see me, they have this idea with putting all labels on and presumptions about me, etc. And I think actually it's about us being really open to actually seeing who's in front of us and not the assumptions we make about them. So I said, yeah, that diversity of all voices, and that's in any key decisions being made, policies, practices within the church. Which Bibles are being used? Which scriptures? Do the churches have the accessible Bible, which speaks to children who have neurodiversity? So when we're saying come as you are and be included, it has to go through absolutely everything possible. And I think also terminology and terms are really, really key to invite people to talk about how they prefer to be referred to, because not everyone is the same. I prefer to be called mixed heritage. My brother prefers to be called a black man. But these terms often get us tied up and twisted with regards to, in particular with flourishing. I think it's really important to take time to listen to people and their stories, but practical ways, it's got to go through everything. Even within leadership positions, it's seeing who's sitting at the table there with regards to leadership, because ultimately it's the decision makers. So if, those listening today, if you have positions of power, and everyone has positions of power, you might be a teacher, you might be a member of the clergy, you might be, if those positions of power, how do you use those positions to make everyone come as they are and be included?
Yeah, really good, all these points. And living in community, I didn't spoke a lot about that part. So I live in a community with 10 other people. I live with people, there are another Brazilian that lives here, and there's a Nigerian, there's a guy that has some heritage from Ghana, and we have also Emma that I know that is watching us, that is from Netherlands. I might be wrong, sorry. And what I learned about all these guys is that, as you said, they are all come from a different culture and a different background, and coming to a common ground and talking, and especially like talking about living together, that sometimes is hard, sharing and everything out of nowhere. You just met these guys, but you need to be there sharing with them all this space. You learn a lot how it's important to stop and listen and have a moment of like learning from them. And I had this experience with one of the guys here, is a good friend of mine, and that I did a joke with him, like a joke that was nothing. It was a nickname that it was more of a play with his own name. And he came to me and said, hey, I prefer not to keep doing these jokes, and if you can, like, stop. And I was like, wow, I didn't know, like 100% it stops now. It's not, when it's not funny for one person, it stops being funny and it's not acceptable. So it's being there and being open to learn, and understanding that sometimes we're gonna mess up and we're gonna make mistakes, but is having the heart to be teachable and be open to learn from experience and not be proud about the things that we have or the ways that we are, and being open to just change whenever we can. And I think also another really important thing, it's like how many times we didn't ask for the Holy Spirit to come and help us to understand and be wise on some subjects. And I think it's so easy sometimes with the business, with all the noise that we have in this world, to forget about doing this little thing that is just, hey, God, help me to be wise. Help me to look at these people with your eyes. Help me to understand them, how you understand them, and how I can love them as you love them. And I think that's some really small things that we can apply that is really easy, and it's going to bring change instantly.
Yes, thank you for that. So a reminder that we do need the spirit of wisdom to be able to know how to best navigate situations and have conversations, and the importance of listening, but also speaking up as well. So I hear that, and thank you for that. Something else that was mentioned, which is connected to this, is about giving time to young people who are trying to save time. I like that, Ale, where you talked about if you want something to grow, you need to give it space to grow. And I was thinking about some of the conversations that I've had, or when I've heard people talk about children and young people, is that in this age where we have social media and those kind of networks, that actually people are longing for connection, longing for belonging, longing for authentic relationships as well. I was wondering, in both of your experiences, do you agree with this? And what kind of commonalities have you seen between youth and young people across cultures?
Definitely, people are craving for identity, for belonging, for places where they can be what they are, and not be worried of like to behave in a certain way or anything related with that. And it's they are going to find this space. If we don't give the space in a healthy environment, they're going to find in an unhealthy environment. That's what I believe. It's like they're not going to stop to seek that. They're going to keep searching for it. And my own challenge for myself is like give that healthy space where they can belong and they can come and we can do things. And something really interesting that I heard in a book by a worship leader, that he said that sometimes we are so attached to it wasn't a worship leader, it was a pastor, that he said that sometimes we are so attached to the traditions that we forget about what actually God says about some things. And it's easy to be attached to traditions and to history and to things that we are used to, and that probably we see that it works, and we are really like, we hold a lot of value on those things. But again, like, how much we are giving space to ask God what actually is the step that we need to take, how we need to do some things, how I need to change and deal with these children, these youth, and these guys, how can I lead them in a better way? And how can I embrace that in an authentic way where they feel embraced and they feel safe to be who they are?
Amazing words, Ale, really amazing. I was thinking about the impact of social media. The generation of children we have today have so much accessibility, like you said, Ale, to all this information. Where do they have the space to then sort of talk about that and have the safe space to discuss things they're reading? I still, in my role, go into schools and hear from and collect voices from children as young as 4 years old, all the way to like the 18-year-olds and beyond. And I think it's really important to know that they are so aware of so much. So then the spaces we create around them have to be safe enough for them to discuss these issues, just like you said, Ale. But I'm also thinking about when they're constantly exposed and bombarded by information that may be to do with racism, the fact that that does impact trauma upon them. Mm-hmm. And it's so key that, you know, our churches and schools are spaces where they can unpick that, and what does that look like, and the other thing to remember is what is important to us as adults, you know, and may not be as important to our children and young people, and vice versa. So it's about having that common balance and having that communication that means that both are important and not dismissing what they find as different concerns. We cannot forget about the pandemic. When I left my previous school, you know, we had children as young as 4 years old who were still suffering from the after effects with regards to trauma. And so they're almost in a space where it's such an unpredictable world for them. And so our spaces within schools and churches to give them that stability, to give them that hope, to give them that love and respect as well, are so crucial.
Yes, thank you both for that. Well, we have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I just want to encourage everyone that if you see a question that you'd like to be answered, then please vote with the thumb and do pop your questions there. So there's one question, and I'm going to read it out and also put it here. It says this: as a person of color who leads the young adults group at my church, I sometimes encounter resistance from white British young adults. Who can help the white British young adults in the church to better engage with young adults from other cultures? And who would be the ideal for this? Is it parents or pastor or any other? So someone as a person of color leads a young adults group. It just disappeared. Oh, Lisa, young as a group. So yeah, sometimes encountering resistance from white British young adults. What would you say to that?
So for me, you see, I'm really passionate about when it comes to things, you know, you said that there's encounter resistance from white British young adults. I think people of colour shouldn't always be the ones to do the heavy lifting when it comes to that. We didn't create the problem, we shouldn't be always the ones to fix it. So for me, it's about actually, I know you mentioned it, could it be parents or pastors? I think it's got to be lots of different members of the community. I'm really passionate about white allyship. So that is where people who dissociate, you know, being white, understand the importance of racial justice and advocate. So it's not always our voices being heard and having to be the ones doing the heavy lifting. And I think that is so crucial in the spaces, because if we look at leadership positions, they do tend to be taken up, you know, statistically in lots of organizations by typically white males. So when we're looking at change, it has to also come from the top, and it needs to be that sense of white allyship. And also parents are so crucial. Parents are so crucial because, you know, they spend, you know, time in church, they spend some time in school, but ultimately a lot of the culture and influence is it has come from the parents. When I've had to, in my previous role, I used to be a teacher, and I did have some instances of racism, which were quite sad. But when you unpick it, it's not really the child, it's the influence behind them. So it's why is there that resistance? And why is it that sort of mindset? So I'd say it needs to be everyone involved, because anti-racism is everyone's business. So it shouldn't just be certain people signposted. I hope that answers your question.
I think Bola already covered a lot of the subject, and just encouragement. I think we should never stay quiet, and always seek for help and have a conversation. It was key for me, having a conversation with my line manager and being open and vulnerable with her, to be able to also make her understand my side. And I think sometimes vulnerability is scary because we open ourselves, and but it's necessary for situations like that, because then you're going to enable people outside of your head to understand better what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and to actually act on it. Because until then, I think people might struggle with just understanding and realizing how serious it is, the matter. So that's just a little encouragement for you.
Thank you for that, both. I would say it is important to have conversations, but it needs to be in the context of relationship, because otherwise it could be triggering, and it could also, not be a safe space as well. So conversation is important, but relationships are most important, firstly, before these kind of vulnerable conversations can take place. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, whoever posted that question. If you do want to talk offline about it, then I'd encourage you to get in touch with one of us, and we can give details of that later. So what other questions have been voted? So there's a question about, do you have any wisdom or advice on helping the whole church to understand more about intersectionality? So any wisdom or advice on helping the whole church to understand more about intersectionality?
Oh, I have a wealth of book lists. My master's was in intersectionality, so yeah. It does involve a lot of learning, and to also just remembering that, as I said, in my presentation, we're not one-dimensional. There are so many different aspects that impact on our lived experiences and our experience of church and of schools and how we are viewed. So, if I think about my own intersectionality, I've already got 4 or 5 different categories that intersect. With regards to helping them to understand that, I think it is about knowing that when we talk about creation, that we're all made in the image of God, and there is so much beauty and diversity, to actually unpick what does that diversity look like. How do we identify? Now, even that questions, or asking a question like, what does it mean to belong? What does it actually mean to belong? That question unfolds so many different responses from different people, and that starts to show that different intersections of different characteristics.
I love that, because I wonder if you can say, one of my identities feels like it belongs, but the other one of my identities doesn't feel like it belongs. So it's good to think about it in that way, but also help others think, actually, we do have multiple identities, and maybe people are not aware of that. So maybe some kind of mapping exercise where people can write out what identities they have.
Exactly, and it's really interesting. I mean, I've mostly done it with children because I love it as an education lead, and it's really interesting how once they keep learning that our identities are constantly evolving and they're changing. Culture is fluid, so it's not stagnant. I think that's really key to think about as well.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on then. So we have a question from Roz. It says, how practically have you experienced church communities going beyond the strapline of everybody welcome to everybody is essential to our combined flourishing? So from everybody welcome to everybody is essential to our combined flourishing. Have you experienced this?
I would let you always start with that, but
So I always jump in, don't I? I'm sorry. I had an amazing experience on Friday. I was in Poole, and I went to the Gypsy Roma Traveller Friendly Churches event. And for me, that is one massive example of a church saying, you know, everybody's essential and that all needed for the flourishing. There were opportunities to hear their stories. There were opportunities to share food. So we were breaking bread together. It was so incredible because the church has said, you know, historically, how Gypsy Roman traveller communities have been treated. And often I will say that when we talk about racial justice or anti-racist discipleship, we forget about the Gypsy Roman traveller communities. And they experience the highest discrimination in the UK out of any ethnic group. So I think it's really important for us to remember that it's those historically marginalized communities. So when we think about, and I'm using this specific example because there's lots of traditions, beautiful traditions around birth and funerals as well, and weddings. And this church has gone out of its way to make sure that they don't feel like it's an add-on, but actually a recognition of actually you are welcome. So it's finding those, I think it's going, as you said, going beyond the straplines of saying is everybody welcome, is actually seeking out those who want to belong but haven't been made to feel like they have before.
Every time I hear about that, it reminds me of First Corinthians 12, specifically the part of unity and diversity in the body of Christ. And I think that sums up the body is not made of only heads or only thumbs or only right hands or only legs. We need different and people, different gifts, different skills to like be a healthy body. And sometimes I may be in the pinky and you may be the head, and we are there and we have our roles and we need to work together and be one body. So that's the only thing that I have on that question.
Thank you for the reminder as well, Ali, about that passage and the importance of diversity. And I was thinking that in our conversation and in your input, we talked about listening to young people and that kind of thing. Bola-Alysia, you also mentioned about empathetic storytelling and talking between generations. I wondered if there's thought about this kind of intergenerational aspect. So that's one of the priorities in the Diocese of Leicester. So it's the mutual flourishing of all generations. So yeah, I wondered if you had any ideas or thoughts around actually strengthening the intergenerational aspect in communities. So as well as empathetic storytelling, but is there something else or something more that we can explore in our contexts?
It's so interesting how I think about my culture back in Brazil. We really have these respect, and it's pretty much like automatic. You respect the elderly because they are elders, and you respect them just because of that. You don't need to know their story. You don't need to know nothing about them to show respect. And I wonder if that is still the case for young people, if they still look at that like this. And I love that the community that we have at Holy Trinity, it's full of elder and young people coming together and doing things together. Not long ago, we had a men's group breakfast for young adults, and it was super cool that we invited one of the elders of the church to come and share his testimony and his story with us, and how much wisdom we can get out of just sharing life with these guys, and just also hearing from them. And I think it's just a matter of connecting these two generations together and making them one in environments where we can enable them to have conversations. I remember also back in my church in Brazil, we had 2 Q&As in different moments with the founders of our church there. That is a pastor called Sarah. She's now 79, and her brother is 76. Both pastors, both planted the church and started the church from scratch 46 years ago. And we just had the opportunity to ask questions and to hear from them and hear their testimonies and their life stories, and how important it is to also do this and not only close ourselves into our little bubbles and our groups and just share between ourselves. So I think enabling and coming together and giving these opportunities to have conversation with these guys, it's something powerful that we can do for this generation.
I think I mentioned about listening, and the reason why I emphasize listening is because when we listen to children and young people, how much impact do their voices have? Otherwise, there's no point in us actually listening to them. So if they are saying and we're hearing them, then they need to see the impact of using their voices. Within churches, I'd say things like even worship services. So, can worship services be designed so that it appeals to different age groups, and even the music, the prayers being involved, how active are they allowed to be in those spaces? The events that happen, even things like intergenerational Bible studies. I think it's really good because, it can be that Bible study groups are just, different age groups, but what about if they're intergenerational? Because that open discussion and mutual learning would allow lots of different interpretations and insights. There's also the sort of possibility of having intergenerational mentorship. So that's, where older adults can serve as mentors to younger individuals as well. So I think similar to what Ale was saying, just as many opportunities as possible to interact across different age groups and not see that as a barrier, but actually there's so much that can be opened up in that space. And, we do have to be mindful, as Ale, you mentioned about, cultural impacts there and how, respect our elders and everything else. But the environment you can create by saying, actually, if you're saying come as you are and be included and that you would be heard, there are so many different avenues, but I hope that's a few suggestions that could be helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you so much. I hear the intentionality behind that, actually. And wouldn't it be great if the intentionality turned into something that was just natural for the church? The intergenerational mixing would be natural. In terms of cultural dimensions, I had a question, Bola-Alysia, around when you talked a little bit about sharing stories across cultures, across generations. And I come from a shame and honor culture. So it's in order to get to the space where we can grow in empathy, that means that we should share things that are a bit deeper and things that maybe some people could be feel ashamed about, actually. So I wondered if you have any thoughts around that, to how to nurture these kind of conversations through, even in the spaces of actually shame and honor culture, and various generations there.
See, I think that when we're thinking about sharing stories, as you mentioned, Jessie, earlier, you know, relationships are so key. Trust is also key, and knowing that, you know, when we come to, there can be places where, when we're thinking intergenerationally, that there are issues between different generations as well, and whose voice has more capital. And it's that humility of actually thinking about what we see as individuals as truths, in order to actually seek reconciliation and to make those spaces as effective as they can possibly be. I think what we also need to think about is a diversity within culture, within Christianity. So, for example, how we might view and see faith and Christianity is very different in different cultures. So when I think about my tribe in Brazil, like when, although I was born and raised in London, but when we'd go back there for holidays, we would give to the youngest first and then all the way to the eldest, as opposed to the eldest always first. So I think we need to take into account that those differences within culture, there's that friction between culture and faith/religion. Whereas I think when I think about, you know, in particular my upbringing, there wasn't a separate word for religion or faith. It was part of culture, and that culture, as I said, is fluid and it's dynamic and it's ever changing. So I think it's that trust, relationships, and respect and dignity for each other is just so crucial for nurturing that.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm looking at the Q&A again, and there's a question which has 2 thumbs up, so I'm going to read it now. It says, when it comes to leadership, it's crucial to ensure that churches provide opportunities for people of colour to actively participate in building the community. Unfortunately, I've noticed that my suggestions and ideas are often overlooked in leadership teams in the context of children and youth ministry, whereas the same ideas suggested by white British individuals are readily accepted. What could be the underlying issue in this scenario?
That's a big one. That is, it's and to whoever's written that question, if it helps, that's been not within church but within schools. I've had very, very similar experiences, and it's the underlying issue is racism. I'm just going to call it out. That is the underlying issue, and you know that it's important for us to just say that is. And even if people saying, oh, you know, I'm not racist, but actually the systems and the processes in place are actually building that whole momentum of racism within that space, especially as you've said, because when the same suggestion's been made by them, that is sadly the underlying issue. And that's what, and those people in those positions, when I mentioned earlier about those positions of power, they are the gatekeepers. They are the gatekeepers. And actually what would be good, because I'm very much a solution-focused person, what would be good is if one of those individuals, from, as you said, the white British individuals, if they said, oh, that was originally so-and-so's idea. That's the allyship I'm talking about, in order to disrupt and change this pattern that keeps happening for you.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Thank you, Bola-Alysia. Ale, do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, I feel like it's so tough to hear those stories. I think it hit me like every time, and it's so tough also to putting myself into that place. And I think in hearing this and being able to also learn here, it's something that is really valuable. And I hope that these situations don't bring down your passion and the fire that you have to suggest and to bring ideas and be creative and want to bring change in all this stuff. I hope you keep doing it. I know it's not easy, and I know it's not hard. It's not ideal, and I know in a different place that it's really tough when people don't hear you and come up with the same idea other person, and just like this goes through. So I can't imagine, but yeah, my heart is really like towards this situation right now, and just feel this need of like just encouraging you to keep doing it, keep seeking like in wisdom, how to bring those ideas, how to bring impact, and sometimes even how acting on that in a way that how can you do these ideas in a different environment that maybe you can do by yourself, like like bringing also creativity and they are opening spaces and safe spaces, that we chatted a little bit about it. Like it's also something that I believe that if it is not growing here, I might do it in another soil. I might explore a little bit on this side, and sometimes it's also an option. But yeah, I'm really sorry for this situation. It's really tough. And thanks for sharing and being vulnerable.
Yes, I'd like to echo that as well. So thank you, Ale. Thank you both for that. And we do have a question which it seems more specific to Leicestershire, I think. How would you comment on the level of awareness and knowledge regarding diversity and inclusivity among churches in Leicestershire in general? Ale, I wonder if you have any thoughts around some of the spaces that you've been. Bola-Alysia, I think it'd be great if we just think about this as around the UK as well. So if either of you have any thoughts, please do weigh in.
Yeah, thinking about Leicester and the reality here, I see so many different churches doing so many different things and in different ways. That is quite incredible, being completely honest. Looking a little bit on my reality at Holy Trinity, there is a lot of different cultures represented. So we have one of the social vicars that is an Indian guy that is amazing, and he always give us so many good teachings. We have so many families from Nigeria, from different places on Africa. We have so many people from Middle East that come from different places and different realities, and we're really happy and that they feel welcome in our community. They feel embraced, and they feel accepted, and even some of it was really nice to see that one group in specific, they still have a broken English, so they don't speak very well and don't understand very well. And what we came up as an idea, it was to bring these guys to a separate group to do a Bible study together while the teaching was being given in the main church. They went to our coffee shop area, sat by the sofas, and had pretty much the same discussion, but in their language, to be able to talk about it and be more involved and discuss about it, and even have the opportunity to ask questions. I think that initiative was really, really great. And yeah, overall, I see a lot of diversity around the churches in Leicester. I feel like we have a lot of people around different places because of the unis that we have here. So there are a lot of young people also that come, and they're far from home, and it's really, really amazing to see and to have the opportunity also to welcome those, and to even share a little bit of the feeling of being far from home as well, and being able to embrace them. So that's a little bit my perspective overall in my experience here with the churches in Leicester.
So I haven't had the pleasure yet of going to any churches in Leicester, but that's on my to-do list. But from a national perspective, I'd say there's a level of awareness with regards to the desire to do more, to do better. Like lots of churches know that there is so much that needs to be done in that space, but they're not quite sure how. And you know, there's discussions about worried about getting things wrong, such as terminology, or making sure that they authentically include people, not that it's tokenistic, not that it's Black History Month, so suddenly there's something, but actually embedded all throughout the year. But I think where churches are doing really well is with regards to those who are really connecting with the local schools. Because if the local schools are then, you know, connected, then it means that what the children are learning is then able to happen again in churches. And so it's that lovely symbiotic relationship, as I like to call it. I would say that overall there's, so we've got our Director of Racial Justice, Guy Hewitt, who is incredible. And he's actively looking at how, you know, our churches, our clergy, they can be upskilled and understand about having, about diversity, equity and inclusion, but also that cultural humility and sensitivity, which is really key. So there's definitely work happening. And I think what is the most important thing is that, you know, churches are saying, you know, please could you give us some guidance with regards to how we can do better. So yeah, but there is work happening in that space.
Thank you very much, Bola-Alysia, Alexandre. I have loads of questions to ask, but unfortunately we have run out of time. So thank you so much for your participation, and thank you all for coming. And I'm going to pass now to Jude, who's going to end our time together.
Well, on behalf of all of us, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Bola-Alysia and to Ali. Firstly, thank you so much for sharing with us this evening. So many fantastic, really valuable points to take away. Thank you very much as well to Jessie for guiding us through the evening and for your expert moderation. And thank you to all of you as well who have made such insightful contributions and offered really thoughtful questions that have helped shape our conversation this evening. We really hope that you've all found this a useful space and that you've been inspired to explore different perspectives, different questions, and that you may continue to do that moving forward beyond tonight. Also like to say a big thank you to Luke for helping make everything go so smoothly behind the scenes with the tech, and also to say thank you to those members of the community of the Tree of Life who have helped contribute towards some of the liturgy that featured in our pauses together this evening as well. And also to say thank you to anyone who has felt able to make a donation towards tonight's event and for continuing Global Voices as a series as well. If you'd like to know more, please do keep an eye out on Dio Mail in the future, and you can also sign up to the discipleship mailing list on the Leicester Cathedral website for future updates regarding Global Voices and any other similar events. Thank you very much again, and we do hope to see you again at a future event. Thank you very much.